Welcome, Claudia. Thank you so much for joining me. I am super excited to be chatting to you today. Especially because probably by the time anyone is watching this, I will be a new mom, and motherhood is sort of your whole essence of your business. So if you'd like to start, tell us a little bit about yourself for anyone that might not be familiar with you and HolyMama.
Yes, so thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here, and especially the motherhood theme. So I started because I was kicked out of corporate, like a lot of people who like, what do I do? This was a long time ago. This was nearly 20 years ago, and I was working for a TV network in Europe. I have a British accent, but I'm Swiss, and I was working as a foreign correspondent in London for Swiss national television. It was a great job, but it was very patriarchally run, and I was the only woman, and they decided they want to replace me with a man. I don't think you could get away with it these days. This is not that long ago, but anyway, I went on a soul-searching mission that took me to Koh Phangan, Cambodia, and Laos. I met a lot of Australians and New Zealanders, but there, the first thing I did was I went on a detox retreat. So I was already doing yoga, and I felt like I needed to reset, and it really did. And I didn't go to this retreat going, this is what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing, or the next 20 years. It was like I was following the breadcrumbs. I was following my need. My need was to be somewhere different, go on a sabbatical. And then step by step, I just kept following breadcrumbs. And that led me then to my first wellness yoga business, which was a beach resort in India, in Goa. So at this time, I was also a new mother, a bit like you. I went out there pregnant, 3 months pregnant, on a holiday with his father. And we were offered a stretch of beach, like to rent, like literally a pile of sand. Yeah, it was quite an adventure. And we decided that we would do a yoga center, and that really took off. It was at the time when people were starting to trust the internet to book holidays. So we didn't have a lot of money, but we had just about enough to put down a deposit. And we went back to Europe over the summer. I had the baby, my firstborn son, who's now taller than me. He's 15, nearly 16. So I had the baby, and whilst I was a bit like you, I was preparing a website, and we got the first bookings for something that didn't exist yet. So this is why I always tell people, you don't always have everything in place, but you have the vision, and you hold the vision, and you act on the vision. So we took action. We didn't just sit there and dream of how this resort would. We implemented it. We created the dream with words and images. We found a stock photo of a Buddha on a beach, which encapsulated the essence of what we were doing. And so that was the first retreat business. And then we went back to Europe. I had a second baby, and then I had a third, all in my 40s, by the way, whoever, for anyone who's watching, listening, thinking that they might be too old to this or to that. So I always like to break those stereotypes and boxes. And with my daughter, I came HolyMama. I mean, I really feel like it channeled through her, because the moment I realized I was pregnant, which was, and I was in Ibiza, was the moment I was offered a house, and it was just like, I got to do this for mothers. And it just started very small with I told my sister, and 5 of her friends came on the first ever retreat. I rented a house, and it just grew from year to year. And before I knew it, it was like, wow, this is like, people are literally emailing me. I was not doing any advertising, but it was feeling such a huge need and demand for mothers, and a lot of single mothers who didn't want to go to some package holiday hotel setup. They wanted to be connecting with their child and having time for themselves to do something they enjoyed, which in most cases is yoga.
I love that. I love that you started and you didn't even have the thing yet. I think that's a lot of blocks as well. We get that we have to have everything prepared, but you can just have the idea and sell the idea and see if that resonates before you actually put all your money and time and investment into something. For HolyMama, was there anything around like that? And is there anything around like it still? It's a very unique concept to me, the mother-child retreats, and I haven't really come across them.
So yes, at the time there was nothing like what I was doing. There was one retreat in the UK that was set up by 3 yoga teachers, but it was just for a certain age group. It was, I think it was babies from 6 months to toddlers. There was nowhere where you could take a child of any age. And the fact that I was the only one doing it meant that for years I was, I literally was the market leader and the only one, and I was filling out these huge retreats. We had groups of maybe 18, 20, so I needed very big locations because every woman had her own room. This is not like the kind of retreat where you sharing a bunk bed, and a lot of retreats can be monetized on the room sharing principle. So when I had this idea, and to do this idea in Europe, it's one thing running a business in India, which is completely crazy, by the way, to run any business in India. It's got its own kettle of fish. But doing this in Europe with really high salaries on an island that is very expensive. I mean, the first house that was offered to me, it was a really nice deal because they were friends of mine, but I still had to pay rent. But to do this in a way that you could monetize it, I found this sweet spot of this location that had 16 rooms, gardens, which in Ibiza, a hot Mediterranean island with grass, is also not very easy to find. And I was just in the perfect place and perfect time for this to happen. And then as it grew and I stepped more and more into my leadership, because at first I was just the organizer. I'm not even a yoga teacher, by the way, for anyone who's considering this. I love yoga and I do yoga, but I've never taken a teacher training. So I was just the organizer. And then I stepped more and more into leading women's circles. And I was already coaching. I was doing fertility coaching before I started before I started HolyMama, because of the book I'd written about getting pregnant when you're too old to get pregnant. And so through that came this incredible business, and women were coming on the retreat and going, I want to do this. This has been life-changing. And it was it was magical. It still is. But what then I started doing was I started training facilitators. So in 2018, I started training facilitators in this particular concept. And I think women from over 20 countries have taken it. Not every single one has then implemented. Some did it, one or two, but there's a real core, I call them my inner circle. The certified retreat leaders, they are also listed on the page. So if anybody's wants to book a retreat like this, there's not so many in Asia or Australia, unfortunately, yet. But there's like 2 weeks ago, there were 4 retreats in Europe alone. And they were all women who'd taken my training. So one was in Spain, another Portugal, there was one in Germany. Actually, there was another in Spain who does pregnancy retreats, and the others are all doing with children. And then there are some in the States. So, there's a demand for it. It's beautiful work because you don't just work with the mothers, but you have the children and the energy of the children, and so many great experiences where the children asked to come back. The children had such a good time and they bonded with each other. So they had their like mornings where the children would be together and the afternoon with their mothers. So everyone got the best of both worlds. And Mama was usually, by the time it was time to pick up her kid, she was super chilled. She'd done yoga, massage, amazing food. Yeah. And then the beaches, and it was more than a holiday, much more than a holiday.
Yeah. How do they work logistically when you've got the kids and then mums and then finding like that balance? I haven't run a retreat, but I've talked to quite a few retreat leaders, and that's always finding that balance within the adult group and making sure everyone's happy. And then you've got this completely different age demographic, presumably of different ages, to try and find that balance. How does that sort of work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that's why I started doing the trainings, because a lot of people told me, and I mentioned the cost, that this is not possible. You can't do this. You can't do this because it's going to cost too much. And I managed to find the sweet spot as well of monetizing it really well. And one of the things I did was I ran the retreats back to back. So I would do a block in the spring and a block in the autumn because I had that much demand. I was able to do that, which meant that I could get the machine rolling because it was a big, very heavy machine to get rolling. It meant staff, kitchen teams. I had like these pop-up teams that would come in, huge childcare team. I mean, when we had the big retreats with 18, 20 mums, we'd have the childcare team alone would be about 10 women. Because this is not like a nursery setup where a child will go and has an acclimatization week or a couple of days. This is like straight in, mum's gone. What happened a lot was women would come with a child that had never been separated from her before, because a lot of the women who are more conscious, maybe they're not there in the attachment parenting style, or there's long nursing. And so we had to create an environment for them to actually feel safe. And for some women, it was the first day it's not going to work going to yoga. And that was part of the process of holding the mother and holding the child. So I did have quite a big team. There was a lot of presence was needed on my behalf. I mean, when I'm speaking in past tense because I'm talking about these huge retreats, and I made the decision that I wasn't going to do them in Ibiza anymore, because now after 11 years, my focus is more on leadership, training women. And actually, one man took the training for papas, which is a great concept. And being really much more bespoke in the retreats I offer. So my retreats are now they're smaller, they're higher priced, and I can just go deeper then, because I can offer one-on-one work, and I do a lot of energy work as well as business. So building business. So I bridge that, a bit like you, I bridge the spiritual with the business. So yes, there are a lot of moving parts. And sometimes I say that working in India was great preparation, because there were so many unpredictables. And with mothers and children, there were a lot of unpredictables. There are tears. There can be drama. There can be overwhelm. And some women would come and literally not had the space or the time to actually feel anyone's presence for them. And because it's such a big change in your life, there is this, and you'll experience this, there's this fragmentation of self that happens when you have a child, because you're reborn as somebody new. You are not the woman you were before. And you have to piece yourself back together. And for some, if there was a traumatic birth or a traumatic separation, so a lot of women would come and they've just recently separated from the father of their child. So they're going through all of that. And of course, the child is going to feel that. And those were often the children that would have the separation anxiety when they were left. All mum was doing was going to yoga, but child doesn't know that. All child sees is mum's here, mum's not here. So yeah, there was a lot of emotional support needed, which is why the therapy team was super important, or is super important. And I had assistance, and the food is really important. So it is a question of being able to hold a lot of energy, to hold a lot of moving energy. There's a lot of moving energy with mums and kids. And it's an art. It really is an art. And that's why I love teaching it, because it's not just like a business training. You need to do a lot of personal development as well. So that's always included in all my programs, because it's what prepares you then for the real life stuff when you're actually on retreat.
Yeah, personal development's one of those things that I discovered very early on when I started running my own businesses, that I was like, okay, we're going to have to work on all of this as well. Yeah, it's just needed. How big would your team have to be for running a retreat like that? How many people?
Yeah, so it really depends. If you're doing it with children, I would say you need a ratio of about, depending on the age. So babies, up to toddlers can also need a lot of hands-on. So that could be from 1-to-1 to 1-to-2. So often for the babies, I would even charge an extra. After time, I realized I had to, I had to find a way to cover those costs. But usually like 2-to-1, maybe 3-to-1. And then you'd need, obviously, the chef. So with retreats, usually with this kind of retreat, if you have less than 6 bookings, you're not really covering your costs, which is why when I was doing the very big retreats, the food becomes cheaper in effect, because the chefs are working the same. I would pay the chefs by the hour. They were working the same amount of hours, more or less, whether it was for 9 people or for 18 people. So you can spread those costs out, which is why when you have this concept, it's good to really work with the numbers. And I have amazing Excel spreadsheets. I love to play with the numbers because you need to be charging enough. And this is another thing where a lot of women in business have to work through quite a lot of sometimes it's ancestral trauma about money and charging enough. Because otherwise, if you're not a really good prophet, because you spend a lot of time prepping as well, then you stop doing it, and the expectations can be quite high. If you imagine a woman who has saved up all year to come, a single mother who's saved up, and she comes and the expectations are very high. So a lot of prep work is needed and a good team. So it depends on the group size to answer your question, but I would say about 1/3 to a half of the number of participants needs to be the team.
It's quite a big group. That's a lot of hats to juggle. It's impressive.
Yeah.
Would you say that these types of retreats could be suitable for first-time retreat like runners, or would they be better off running sort of standard retreats and then branching into that avenue?
Pretty much all of the women who did the certification or who take my trainings for this concept have not run retreats before.
Okay.
Some of them afterwards took a yoga teacher training. Some of them were transitioning from corporate, and they came on a retreat with me, and they went, this is what I'm going to do now, because I'm not going back to that job where I have to sit at a desk for 8 hours. So there are really, I'm trying to think if there are any exceptions. I would say not really. And that's why the training is so effective, because it enables and it gives them the courage and it gives them the blueprint. Because there's always going to be people like the one now who I mentioned before, who does the pregnancy retreats in Spain. She actually did have an advisory board, and she whole team who was supporting her because she had some money to invest in the business. And even they were saying, no, make sure the hospital's close by. What if someone has, suddenly starts going into labor, and all of the things that can go wrong. And I can safely say from, 11 years of doing this, I didn't have one really sticky situation or emergency, the kind of thing that people warn you about. But of course, it's good to be really well prepared and have all of the pieces in place. And I mean, as you know, if any kind of program or training, it's about having peer support as well. So now I have this community, and we were just in the chat today sharing some best practices. There was one woman had an experience with a really con artist client who was trying to make out she was an influencer, and so we were just kind of going, watch out, because she'd actually contacted everyone in the group. So those kind of things, where community is really amazing to have. And it's a joy to see how this business model works and how women can take it on and they do it and they thrive and it becomes their business. I was never into making a franchise with this. That was far too old paradigm, patriarchal for me. I was like, this is a business for you. So they all have their own names, and that was part of the creative process of creating your own brand and having, coming up with the name, and they have their own, obviously, social media, and it's incredible to see. It's this empowerment piece as well. They're, empowering others to empower others.
Yeah, that's a beautiful because there's obviously monetary gain where it's a business. We all want to be making some money out of it to cover our time. There's a lot of time going into this. What would you say have been any like favorite client transformations in terms of it could be someone that's come and become a HolyMama teacher, or someone that's just come on the retreat that you've seen? I imagine that sort of return of energy is going to be a big reward as well.
You know, this is what makes it all worthwhile.
Mm.
When women go away and are transformed, or they it usually happens around midweek. So I've got a lot of examples, like the woman now who runs, she's called Alex Soul Sanctum Retreats in the UK. She came, she'd had postpartum depression that was undiagnosed. She came and she was literally like at a loss with everything, and she didn't even she shared a picture of her at her daughter's first birthday, and she's trying to smile, but she says behind the smile she was just so depressed. And she came on the retreat and had, I think by about day 3, she told her partner, this is what I want to do. I found it. I found my calling. And she does these amazing retreats. So she's an example of someone who really then took on this model and is happily doing it. And then there's another example of a woman who actually just sent me a WhatsApp the other day about the fact that I'm sort of stepping back, and I'm slightly stepping back to make space for the women who were doing this, because for a long time I was the market, you know, I was the one, and I didn't want them to feel like they were in my shadow. And now that I've stepped away from Ibiza, they're like, oh, Ibiza's now available, kind of thing. But so this woman messaged me and said, I can't believe it. This is such a shock. Are you really sure? So she had come, and I'll briefly tell her story. She had come on the retreat with twins, and the twins would not leave her, let her do yoga. There was a lot of frustration she was moving through. They were crying. She was crying. And about on the second day, she came to me and she said, you know what? I'm going to go home because I am destroying the atmosphere for everyone. I'm really sorry. I'm just a nightmare, and so are my children, kind of thing. And then we started to talk to her. And on the team, I had a doula who's amazing, who's going to be actually at the Bali retreat in a couple of weeks. But by the time this airs, that we'll already have done the Bali retreat. But so she then started speaking to her, and we realized that they had had the most worst birth trauma imaginable at the hospital where she actually worked. So she was working, she was an accountant at that hospital. And when her twins were born, they separated. She had a really difficult birth, and they put the twins, after being in the womb for so long, in separate buildings, and the mother in another building for days. Right? Crazy, in Switzerland.
That is crazy.
She had not spoken about this. The healthcare system had failed her. And this is what I saw time again. The healthcare system had not only failed her at her birth, but they'd failed her in the postpartum period. So she came on this retreat. I think her twins at the time were about 2 already, with this that had never been spoken of. And she was finally able to process it. By day 4, she'd had her breakthrough. That's often what happens when someone comes like that and there's a breakdown, and she was literally ready to pack her bags and go home. By day 4, there was like, by the last day, her twins were happily playing, I think the second last day already. And she went to yoga, and she booked the next year and the next year. I think she came back about 3 times, because this is the kind of miracles that can happen. And it's not a miracle as in boom, it's just doing the right thing at the right time, understanding what the cause of it was, and very quickly she was able to move through it.
That's amazing. We were actually talking about twins before the recording as well. So, and I said how at like 12 weeks, I think it is, once they have little hands, they're touching each other preferentially for like the entire pregnancy. So I can imagine that would be crazy traumatic if you are in the safe, warm place and then suddenly mum's gone, siblings gone, everything's gone. Do you notice when the mums have processed some things and have these transformations and these breakthroughs, does that reflect in the children much that you've noticed in these retreats?
Yes, there's definitely a strong connection. This is why, so the childcare team we would have daily meetings at the beginning of the day. We'd have a check-in, and we did a circle, and sometimes we danced, and it was always fun. And at the end of the week and at the start of the week, we'd have, really longer meetings, because there needed to be a constant feedback loop between what's going on with the mother and what's going on with the child. So I would do a women's circle, let's say on the second evening, and then on the next day, the childcarers would feel it in the children. They would feel the shift through the mothers, because often that was the women coming together. It was the bonding that happened in the group and the relaxation. And sometimes the children would be playing out, or they will play out scenarios that they've experienced either at home or that their mother's going through. So that link, there has to be a constant flow of information. And also, if a mum's had therapy that's brought up stuff, so I would always keep that communication going. So yeah, that's super important. And like I said before, sometimes it was this thing of happy baby, happy mother. So that's why it's so important that the childcare team are really good, really heart-centered. It's not like a job, it's a vocation. It's like a sacred work. And the childcarers, it was always a very important selection process who works on the team. It wasn't just like, here's your salary, off you go, and they would do it just for the hours. It was like a whole experience as well. And I mean, we had a really good reputation on the island for them to bring in their friends, and it was just also making the working environment a lot of fun. And I used to drive to work, or I'd drive to work and think, this is not like work, this is amazing. So I do love retreats, and I'm speaking a lot in past tense now, because I'm talking about the big retreats in Ibiza, which I've now said, okay. And this is why it's been so hard. It's taken me 18 months to work through this, because why let go of a good thing? Why let go of something that's working? And that takes a lot of courage. But I know that also I'm 55 now, so I'm not going to do this for the next 10 years. My next 10 years are getting back to writing, really being here for women who are stepping into leadership, mentorship. I do spiritual mentorship and retreat, this obviously this program. So this is similar to motherhood. When women become mothers, sometimes it really is like they would go back to their job because they enjoyed it, but actually there's something else now waiting for them that's far more expansive. And all of us now, we talk about this freedom lifestyle. We don't want to be working so many hours anymore. And this is really what changes when you become a mother as well, because those years with your child are so special. Obviously, not everybody wants to hang out with their kid for 10 hours. We want to also have purpose in life. And this kind of business allowed me to do both, which was incredible. At the early years of my kids being babies, I would go upstairs and I'd write emails to clients. I'd get the bookings in, and then I'd spend the day hanging out with my kids. It was perfect.
Nice.
I'd take them on retreat.
You did take them on retreats with you? Yeah. How did that work? Did you have like an extra childcare team for them?
It depends on the age. So when my daughter, obviously the older one, the boys were bigger, and they would come and hang out and enjoy the childcare team. So they would be really easy to integrate into the childcare team. And when my daughter was a baby, right at the beginning, she was one of those chill babies where she just loved people around. So you could sit her in the high chair in the kitchen with all the activity, and she'd just be there watching, and everyone would come up to her. And so it was pretty easy. It depends, every child is different. But yes, I would definitely say that if you are there with your child, you're there for your clients. So you do need someone to make sure that your kids are not, or your child isn't like, mom. But it can work quite well together, especially for a single mother who wants to combine this with travel. So go to a bucket list place where she wants to do the retreat and then add on some time. And then it's always good. Yeah, it's good to have someone who would take care of your child as well, so you can be fully present for the guests. Because unless you have an assistant who does that, but even when you have an assistant, you are the owner, the founder. Nobody's going to do it like you. And a bit like in a restaurant, people want to see the boss. They want to speak to the owner. You know, it's like, it's customer service.
Yeah, they want that connection with you, especially if they've come on your retreat, if that's how it's advertised and you're the one that's been communicating with everyone. What do you
Yes.
think, speaking about just business and motherhood, what's been the most challenging aspect of trying to find balance there for you, and how have you managed this?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it's something that's taken me a long time to figure out what's best. But I think it's a question of prioritizing different things at different times and chunking out time. And the biggest challenge with motherhood is that there's constant distraction. And we think, okay, I'm going to do this now, and then something happens, or you can't actually finish what you're doing. And when you can't finish what you're doing, things get a bit bitty and fragmented and messy. I mean, obviously, there's a period when kids are little. When they're very small, they sleep a lot. And I would then do work when my kids were having naps. But then there's also laundry to fold. And there's a lot of things new things that are added into the equation when you become a mother. And then the older they get, the more independent they are. So now I can take calls when, with my kids are old enough, they can occupy themselves, they do homework, or they go out and they play football or whatever. But there's definitely a period when it's more challenging, and having childcare, having support definitely helps, because then okay, for these 3 hours, whether it's a grandmother or you take them to a nursery or it's a babysitter. I did have for a while, I had a babysitter who would come to my house and hang out with my daughter for a couple of hours so I could this is when the business was growing really quickly, so I could get work done. And then I would work a lot in the evening when they were asleep, and that can be really tiring. So yeah, there are sometimes there are these stretches where you are feeling like everyone's wanting something from you, and that is where you also, as a woman, you need to really learn about boundaries and to say no to things. Being able to delegate certain things can help, but obviously as you're building a business, you need to have the cash flow to delegate, so you do a lot yourself. So the first 4 years I answered every single client email until I got an assistant to do that. So I answered hundreds of emails, and then the tech caught up as well. So I was able to automate. So by the time I had hundreds of clients in a year, I was already using an automation that would send them the email, 2 weeks before, 8 weeks before. But there's always things to do. So yeah, good. It's a good question. I don't think there's one answer to it.
Yeah. Where is there a common sort of area, would that be where women tend to get stuck when growing their business, just getting that overwhelm of all the things?
Yeah, I think with women, especially because a lot of women are building personal brands, they take things too personally because it's so intermeshed with themselves. So especially with social media, this is maybe shadow feminine of comparing and not enoughness, and seeing someone else do it and thinking, well, I can't do that because, and having a story around it. And then you try it and you're not getting the feedback that you thought you might get. And then you go, oh, it's because I didn't do enough, or I did too, or I'm too much. Whereas a man, would you tend to go, oh, that's interesting feedback. It means I have to do it differently next time. And much more just not, don't take it personally. So that's definitely something I see a lot of female entrepreneurs. There's a very steep learning curve with that. And another thing as well is feeling like you have to you have to, like, that pressure to do it all at once. And I think if you chunk down things, so what I do now, for example, is I have 3 days, the middle of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, when I see clients. Those are the only days I take calls or do clients. And then Monday is my sort of creative day. Sometimes it's a travel day, and Friday is CEO day, where I would, I do things like go to a spa on a Friday or a Monday. I might go to the hairdresser on a Tuesday morning if I've got calls, So my schedule is quite flexible, but I know that there are certain days when I am here to serve my clients. There are certain days when I'm here to create social media. Doesn't mean I don't do a story on a Wednesday, but it means that Monday there's more focus. So it's like finding parts of the week where you can, or parts of the day where you focus on something rather than trying to do it all at once.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess if you have that structure, you're not questioning, wasting time, like, what am I doing today? You know that that's the focus of that day. So it just takes
Yes.
that one less decision away from you as well.
Yes. Yes. Time management's very important when you're a mum.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of mom guilt around balancing your business and being like, oh, I'm working on my business and then I should be a mom and then I should be working on my business and now I'm not working, blah, 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 blah. It goes around. How does actually running a business as a mom rather than having a normal job benefit the children?
So mum guilt is one of these sores of patriarchy that mothers and, trying to make women take on a certain role and they are never going to fulfill that role. So that's where that mum guilt comes from. So whether if you have a job, you have mum guilt because you're not with your kid that time. And then when you come back, you have mum guilt. I mean, there's always mum guilt no matter what you do. So it's a question of reframing it and getting, I mean, guilt, shame, and fear, they are such conditioned beliefs onto us. And it's doing it your way. And there's no right way. And there's plenty of especially younger women now who are really having this conversation about we don't want to be like that. I mean, already my generation was quite radical compared to my mother's generation. And we were the first generation really to benefit from the women's movement because my mother didn't have a choice. She got pregnant at 20, she got married. It's not so long ago where women still had to have their husband's signature to even start a business or have a credit card. So this, we sometimes forget how it hasn't been that long that the situation was very different. And the 50s housewife who's perfect with her apron and the husband comes home, that stereotype is not so long ago. So we're breaking out of all these old molds and expectations and redefining what it means for us, and for each woman that's so individual. Yeah, so I would say if you're feeling guilty, know that it's normal to feel guilty, and give yourself a lot of compassion about it, and understand that you are not the only one. This is what was also the beauty on that's the beauty of these mother-child retreats, because when the mothers come together in that kind of environment, which I call it the LoveField, because you really set the resonance. It's not like one of these children mother groups that you get at the local health center where there can be a lot of competition, and it doesn't, I've heard women talk about that these aren't actually very nurturing spaces. They can be, but having had bad experiences. So the retreat environment really cultivates this connection because you have the time to do it. You don't have to worry about cooking. You're together. And this is why this women's circle event was always so important, because in the share, there's this realization that you're not alone, that the others are feeling exactly that too. And then you stop shaming yourself, because often for women, it's easier for us to have compassion for another woman than for ourselves. And then that starts to, it's like the ice starts to melt. And we realize that this actually isn't something that's serving us to feel guilty.
Yeah, I haven't been down the motherhood road yet. Well, by the time this airs, I probably will be. But from my personal experience with being in women's circles, I think that's one of the most powerful things about it, is there's all these things that you think it's just you, and it's not just you, it's everyone. And it might be a little bit different for everyone, but there's generally some commonalities, and not feeling alone in the journey is very, very powerful. Cool. So before we jump off today, I wanted to ask you, how training works. If anyone has listened to this and thought this is a really interesting concept and they resonate it and they'd like to learn more about hosting these styles of retreats.
Yes. So, I mean, I have like two businesses that I've built. One is the in-person retreats and the other is the online business. So with the online business, and I just love business. So the online business has been built over years, and I have like what you could call an offer suite where there are different entry points. So you can get something for like $22, you can get something for 2,000, you can get something for 200. So for retreats, there's lots of different options. What for the certification, which is specifically has been geared towards this concept with children, you take like one of the level 1 trainings like LoveField leadership or retreat CEO, and I run retreat CEO. At the moment I'm running it like once or twice a year, and that's where you get the live access, because usually it's one thing taking a course that's instant access or evergreen. It's something else having the person who can help you implement. So that's where I really value mentorship. And what I've just created now recently is this year-long journey, mastermind journey, where it's an all access to all my courses with regular Q&As with me. And so this is a group container. But it means that, because what I see a lot with someone who's new to business is they might take the retreat leader training, but they don't know anything about marketing. They don't know anything about launching. They don't know anything about sales, or not enough to make the business a success. Because at the end of the day, you've got to get what I call bums on seats, right? Your retreats have to sell out, because if it's one thing planning a retreat, it's something else selling it out. And for it to sell out is where you make the money. So the two go hand in hand. And yeah, so I would say, if you're interested, just, I mean, my Instagram DMs are open. That's, I think, how most people communicate these days. Email is also an option. And just check out if I've got any live retreats going on. I've got a couple this year. I also love going to Morocco. Morocco is a great place for retreats. I know it's far for Australians, but New Zealand. But Bali is Bali is always a dream. It's very similar to Ibiza in that it's a transformational portal island, a lot of water, fire energy that allows you to, like, it works like a before and after. So yeah.
Yeah, Bali is beautiful. I have been to Morocco as well, and it's a lovely place. Bali's still pretty far for New Zealand, unfortunately. It's like, yeah, it's easier for Australians. Otherwise, I would go often. And we will have all the links to connect with you if anyone listening would like to find you, so you can find them in the show notes. And my final rapid fire question, if you could turn to yourself in your first year of becoming a business owner, entrepreneur, what advice would you have for yourself?
It's going to be a wild ride. Have fun.
I love that. That sums everything up very well. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. That was a really fascinating conversation, and I love how unique your business model is and how it's really helping focus on serving as well, which is, I think, what all of us are here for, everyone listening. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.